Hey there, and welcome to the New Role of Physical Security Solutions webinar hosted by Comstar Technologies. I'm Dean Perrine, Executive Vice President of JSA, and welcome viewers to the webinar. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed just about every aspect of the way we live and work. So what will returning to the office look like? For many, the additional signage and new directions may jump out first. But behind the scenes, your physical security solutions are working overtime to provide an additional layer of protection and peace of mind. In this webinar, panelists will discuss everything you need to know about the current physical security trends and how to prepare your office for a successful and secure return, including things like keyless entry and mobile access control, thermal cameras, visitor management, funding and grants available for funding or for physical security. Before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A or the chat box. We will be addressing all questions on Comstar's LinkedIn page after the event, where we'll also be announcing the winner of the Verkada security camera. So you don't want to miss that. We'll be posting the link to the post-event LinkedIn discussion right in the chat box. So make sure that you are all on the lookout for that as well. Okay, enough from me. Let's go ahead and get started. It is my pleasure to introduce our expert speakers and thought leaders for today's virtual roundtable. They are Mr. Morgan Harris. Morgan is the Enterprise Solution Engineer at Verkada. Ms. Leslie Mathis. Leslie is the Asset Manager at Woodfield Investments. Mr. Dave Johnson. Dave is the President at Comstar. And finally, Mr. Warren Rayburn. Warren is the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Comstar. Everyone, thank you very much for participating in the webinar. We're glad you're here. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off right now. As I mentioned earlier, returning to the office and reopening plans, things that are top of mind for everyone, nearly everyone right now, since many businesses are beginning to discuss their returns to the office and what heading back is ultimately going to look like. Dave, let's go ahead and start with you. As president of a company, how do you recommend business owners and management enforce we're getting right into the dicey stuff right away. Owners and management enforce new social distancing guidelines into their office return plans without overly affecting company culture?
So that's a great question. I think, I kind of think that the question is, how does your company culture affect those policies? I think those two things are really integrated together. And if you start at the foundation, the foundation is that the people are the company's most important asset. If you kind of go into this understanding that, and then their health and safety becomes your kind of number one priority. So if you have a culture that's really genuinely interested in the well-being of your employees, and not because of like their impact on the business, but because you sincerely care about their safety and success, the employees are much more likely to abide by these policies. So I would say just starting at the kind of core of, look, you're here, you're trying to protect the people that work at your company, and then the policies you create should be aligned with that. And if they are, then the employees are going to know that they're doing this for our well-being. They're doing it to protect us. And it makes it a lot easier to get them to either abide by or help enforce those policies.
Excellent, Dave. Thank you. Leslie, this one is for you. Are there any new procedures or operational changes brought on by COVID that you are personally navigating at your multiple sites?
Yeah, so of course. I mean, I think that everything that we are doing right now has absolutely changed. And as an industry, the multifamily industry was forced to adopt probably 5 years of technology in a 60 to 90 day period. Everything we're doing has completely changed. And it's changed so much. I feel like we have spreadsheets to track our tracking spreadsheets. Rent collections have changed. How we manage our amenity spaces have changed. What does our future pipeline look like? How do we handle technology? How do we embrace what's going on today when it comes to the design of future projects too? And very similar to what Dave just shared is all of that impacts our teams and our residents. So how how do we navigate that as well? And a lot of it's come down to communication. And there's been some really great technology that we've adopted, and not just from virtual tours and self-guided tours, but also how we communicate out to our team members and how we communicate to our residents. It's ever evolving, and just about the time that we think we have it under control, then a new month rolls around and something else happens or something else comes out, and we have to navigate a new change. And so our team members and our residents have had to learn to be very flexible. And I don't know that we know all the answers and what this means for even, what will happen in October. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely made us learn how to adopt new strategy and pivot when things change.
Yeah, a great point. And you mentioned pivoting, and you also mentioned October. So it does seem to me that while we have all made a pivot to some degree or another, we may not be done pivoting. So especially when you're looking at multiple sites, there could be a different pivot per site, right? So there's a lot to be thinking about there. Just moving on, Dave, another question for you. Security provides peace of mind for employees in general, but how do the new solutions take things a step further when it comes to keeping your teams happy and healthy and ensuring that they are all following protocol? So things are evolving, as Leslie said, but how do those new securities help things?
I think to answer that simply, I think the systems, these solutions nowadays, they come to you. I think, not that long ago, security systems were something you had to go to in order to look at. These systems nowadays, they're way more proactive, and they're integrated with the tools employees use every day. So, the ability to send notifications to multiple mediums, to multiple devices, to multiple people, it really weaves these security solutions into our day-to-day activities in a pretty non-intrusive way. So, just as an example, a pretty generic example, you could kind of apply it at any undesired state. But let's just say you had an employee, they leave their mask in their car, and they approach your front door without their mask. The cameras nowadays can actually pick that up, and it can send notifications to them via email, via text, and say, hey, policy says you have to wear your mask. So it can send it to them, it can send it to their manager. And not only that, it can actually keep the front door locked until that person puts a mask on. So I think that's really the biggest difference is these systems don't sit in a closet anymore waiting for some sort of event to happen. They're actually a part of a proactive solution that allows the system to come to you. So you don't really have to go seeking it. If you set it up the right way and it's integrated with the other solutions that you have, it'll come to you, which is a lot different than it used to be.
So would you say it's more or less invasive, or neither?
I'd say it's integrated. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's intrusive. I think it's a part of, or you can make it a part of the way you operate. And I think that's an important distinction because, right now, these policies are inconvenient. Wearing a mask is not convenient, but it's really necessary. So you have to have some kind of reminder. Hopefully the people are on board with it, but some sort of reminder. I know I've personally walked out of my office without my mask on, and now I'll catch myself. But if I had something that was letting me know that, particularly walking up to the building, I think that's pretty helpful, and it's integrated as opposed to intrusive.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave. All right, our webinar registrants, it's time to get you folks involved in the webinar today with our first poll question. Poll question number 1 is, according to, I need to move this so I can read the question. There we go. According to Deloitte's CFO study, what percentage of businesses do you think are back to their pre-COVID operation level? According to Deloitte's CFO study, what percentage of businesses do you think are back to their pre-COVID operation level? You should all be able to see that now, and go ahead and pick what you think. Warren, any predictions on this one? What do you think?
I was going on the lower end of things myself, Dean. I went with 23%, just based on what feedback we're getting from our clients. While keeping in mind there's a lot of, thankfully, folks in the emergency services space or otherwise that it's standard operating. So that's where I'm at.
How about you, Morgan?
We're starting to slowly see people kind of things thaw out, if nothing more. You know, everything start to move a little bit, but definitely not where it used to be. Even inside of our own organization, I think everybody's finally getting adjusted to it. I can tell you at least one thing: we'll all be pretty good at Zoom by the time this is over. I wouldn't put us in the expert category, but we'll be a lot better than where we started.
Yeah, I actually agree. Although I will miss the time when people who aren't used to being on Zoom are being interrupted by people in a towel behind them getting in the refrigerator. That has really made things a lot more fun during quarantine.
For sure.
Just give it out, and here we go. All right, interesting. So 37% said 17%, 34% said 23%. So I think, Warren, much of our registrants were kind of in line with what you were saying on, I think, and then we had 11% say 61 and 17% say 42. And the reality is that it's 42, according to the Deloitte report, the Deloitte study. So 42%. So interesting. So maybe more than some of us think. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's not for me to determine, but interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and move on, and let's talk a little bit about solutions. And Morgan, I'm going to go right back to you. Working in technology, I can imagine that there's a sudden wave of people asking for specific solutions that comply with kind of the new normal, or the new abnormal, as it were. But what solutions seem to be requested the most from you right now? And I do believe that you have a deck to share with us as well.
We do, yeah. You know, I think for us, it's been pretty interesting as not only somebody who produces technology, but is also a consumer of it. That a lot of the asks that our customers came to us with were also the same asks that our internal teams came to us with, to try to make our own ability to continue to function pretty easy. And I think it's probably easier for me to kind of share a couple of these with you than kind of explaining them. You should be able to see my screen. And one of the things that we had kind of built for helping customers, you know, prior to the pandemic, understand usage of their facilities, layouts, and things of that nature, became a pretty important tool. So as you kind of see this little Doppler radar around our floor plan here, these are motion events, so people walking around our facility. And one of the things we added pretty early on in the pandemic was our ability to kind of go back through time and see where people are congregating and see where they were. And what was kind of interesting to us is we have this back hallway over here. We didn't think it was a commonly used hallway. Nobody ever really talked about it. You know, most people always came in our front entrance here, came around there. And as I kind of scroll through time, I can see that the back hallway is used a lot more. And the amount of people that are in our shipping and receiving room far outnumbers the amount of packages we have. So another side effect of things that we should be looking into in our organization. I think everybody's looking for their Amazon Prime box, and it's not arriving as quickly as they'd hoped. But these were like two of the things that we kind of initially came out with. And then subsequently from there, we've built in notifications. So much, you know, to some of the points earlier about things coming to you, it was easier for us to go in and build some notifications that if we saw multiple people inside the frame, that we could go ahead and set an alert as a friendly reminder that you're, you know, congregating in some of our cafeteria or kitchen areas, and to maintain that social distancing. But I think, you know, when we're trying to talk about solutions, we look at some of the solutions that are direct consequences of what we need to do, right? Helping people socially distance, help, you know, make sure our facilities are clean and orderly. But there's also kind of all of these little teeny gotchas that you kind of take for granted. And one of them being that if we take a look at our access control side, we used to have our front door open all the time, welcoming visitors into our facility. We're a very open group. We like having friends and family over to check out all the cool things that we're doing. But now with COVID, we needed to adjust that. And so changing the schedule before we moved into this facility on our old access control system was kind of cumbersome. We had to find the guy who knew the guy who remembered the password and where the server was to do it. But now for us, it's easy enough to hit the schedules tab and come in here and just make a quick adjustment. And we could do this here in our US offices as well as our offices around the globe. So I think little things like that, when we talk about accessibility of the technology that we kind of take for granted, we look directly for those features that kind of maybe check a single thing off the list, screening people, checking to make sure people are safe, making sure that they're, socially distant, wearing their masks. All those things check off independent boxes. But we also wanted to make sure we had a suite of solutions that also just simplified the process of doing those things, because you don't really want to add more work to the process of just trying to get back to zero, for lack of a better term. Right. And I think, some of these pieces that have come out, we continue to kind of release additional features around this. One of the other big ones that we always talk about is we have 300 people in our office. We get tested weekly. We're very stringent about, social distancing, sanitizing, all these different things that we can keep it running. But there is going to be that time that unfortunately somebody might get sick. And so when we do that, we want to make sure that we can figure out all the people that person has come in contact with. So for example, here I can grab one of our co-founders, Hans. He's a social guy. He likes to check out everybody, see everywhere he's been inside of the building. I can quickly throw this search in here. I can throw his photo right up here, and I can see exactly where he's been around the building. And this way, I can see all of the people that he's interacted with. So he's, I would say, he's pretty good on the mask, even carrying his stuff back into the cafeteria. But I can see here quickly that he's interacted with multiple people in this frame. And, for contact tracing, I needed to contact those folks. It's very simple for me to click in to be able to bring up that video click and identify all the people inside of that frame. So those are some of the kind of simple things that we've put into the platform. Again, this is accessible from anywhere. But these were all things that not only helped our customers, but helped us to try to continue to maintain our operations.
Very good. Thank you. Fascinating stuff. Honestly, I could watch that all day long. I don't know if it's the voyeur in me or what, but it's fascinating. And obviously, there are some operational benefits to kind of knowing where people are at any given time.
Yeah, I think, Dean, one of the things that we've talked about for a while here is these systems don't necessarily have to be in place to prevent things. If you look at them the right way, they can help productivity. And I don't mean that in terms of we're going to keep an eye and make sure everybody's working, but you can look at what conference rooms are being used, or are there bottlenecks in your manufacturing facility? These tools, especially the way that Verkada has them laid out, provide a lot of data and insight that if you use it in a positive and constructive, productive way, they can really help a business out.
Yeah. I mean, that became abundantly clear. It wasn't just about safety and security, but about productivity, efficiencies. There are lots of things there. Fascinating. Okay, very good. I'm going to, unless Leslie or Warren have anything to add to that discussion.
Oh, thank you, Dean.
Oh, you got it. I'm going to jump into the next poll then. Time for some more fun. What do you consider to be your security exposure point? What do you consider to be your security exposure point? Visitor registration and tracking, inventory and asset management, remote viewing and backup options, compliance and liability, legacy equipment, and antiquated technology. Well, I think I'm going to go here. Leslie, any predictions on this one?
I don't know. Maybe the visitor tracking or the antiquated technology.
Visitor tracking was the one that I chose, actually. How about you,
Me
Warren? What do you
too.
think?
I went with the asset tracking and management. I just think of organizations that now, having a vast majority of their workforce remote, keeping tabs on those items in the office, again, engaging third parties or otherwise as need be to move materials and otherwise. Those are the things I was thinking of. And then the visitor component of it, certainly I was thinking of Leslie and, the multifamily dwelling unit environments, commercial spaces, multi-tenant, just as Morgan illustrated there, being able to keep tabs on people as they make their way around the buildings and otherwise.
And Morgan, I feel like if anyone's going to have a good beat on this, it's going to be you. What do you think?
Well, I mean, for sure, visitor tracking is a big part of it because I think we take for granted how many people come into our facilities. It could be that spouse, significant other that's dropping off lunch, that's coming to pick somebody up, that's, just the amount of deliveries we seem to get at our facility every day. I think we probably see at least 10 or 12 Amazon Prime drivers in there. So, just locking our front doors was unfortunately the first way we could figure out just how many people popped into our office just to say hi on a daily basis. And you kind of overlook those things in the normal course of your business.
What about you, Dave? Folks are going to pick on this one?
Oh, I definitely put legacy equipment. Yeah, I thought that because I think that overrides all the other, in order to accomplish this stuff, if you have legacy equipment, you're not going to be able to do it. So that's what
you weren't alone. 33% said legacy equipment, 36%, so that came in second. 36% said visitor registration and tracking, inventory and asset management at 6%, and remote viewing and backup options at 6%, compliance and liability at 18%. None of us mentioned compliance and liability, but obviously it's probably something that needs to be thought about a little bit too.
Yeah.
So.
If there's IT people on, that's generally the area that they'll focus on. So maybe we don't have that many IT people on the in the attendee.
Yeah. So you IT people who might be registered, definitely join us at the end for the LinkedIn discussion, because I'd love to get some perspective from the IT folks on this discussion a little bit more too. Excellent. So I am going to keep moving forward. Leslie, this is for you. What advantages do these solutions provide? For residents, property managers, and offices alike? So we're talking about the advantages kind of across this the greater swath of potential stakeholders here. So residents, property managers, and offices.
Yeah. So when I think about the resident portion, it's probably more of a benefit for us, but I think it helps with accountability with them. We now use a lot of cameras in our amenity space, and so hopefully that helps with accountability on how those spaces are supposed to be used. Specifically for my teams, though, it's a great resource, like to have the backup footage, to have the technology in place. Today with all the changes in our environment, it's really important for us to know who's coming and going from the building, and we need that technology in place. Maybe before this, we had antiquated technology, but now it's forced us to adopt new technology that makes more sense for the asset itself. And then for the ownership side, which is really important to me, the reporting and the data this technology provides is invaluable. I need this information so that I can decide how I'm going to manage that building more efficiently. And then what does it mean for future assets as well? So if I can use this technology and take the data that it's gathering, then I can make decisions on what amenity spaces should be open 24 hours a day, or what amenity spaces do I need in future projects? How do I control the building when it comes to visitors and guests and deliveries? So the data and reporting that this technology provides is the most important piece, in my opinion.
Very good. Anyone else have anything to add on that point? Okay. All right, sounds good. Let's talk about visitor entry management. And Warren, this is all you, my friend. So what options for administering this this need? What are the options for administering, visitor entry management, and how do you integrate with other security solutions?
Yeah, absolutely, Dean. And for me, just on a personal note, I had spent the first 20 years of my career in the carrier services space. So in joining the Comstar family in January, this is an area that I've learned a great deal about. So I'm excited to be here today to participate and extend some of that to the participants here. So, in terms of the visitor entry systems, I always traditionally thought of your security guard, you hand over your license, maybe get a temporary ID or what have you. But the depth of the offerings that are out there today take that experience to a much greater, extent and a deeper level. I think that this is the next generation, if you will, of the ID exchange and guest registration programs for schools, government buildings, multi-tenant scenarios that Leslie touched on in both the commercial and residential space. For me, fundamentally, it boils down to, as a parent with two children, school-age children, kindergarten and third grade, it's a question of individuals entering a building, and are they permitted to do so? What portions of the building should they have access to? And from there, as Morgan illustrated, do we have access to monitor their whereabouts? Dave touched on a very key topic for me earlier, and that's the integration side of this and how interconnected all of these items are now, and the ability to, take, for example, the visitor entry software that we're talking about right now and integrate that into your access control and your door system. So you can create on the fly permissions for visitors that keep them out of certain areas of your buildings. Going back to the school consideration, you have contractors passing through, and otherwise you can restrict their access based on permissions. You can restrict their access to certain, portions of the building, for that matter. So, again, those are two big keys for me: integration and the interconnectedness of all of the technologies that we're here talking about today. Dean, for me, there's some things that for the audience purposes that I wanted to extend, in terms of what to look for. How invasive is the deployment? So in this case, with visitor entry software, with many of our partners, it's a native device that's installed on premise. Think of an iPad, for example, that's sitting on a desk or at an entry point. The next component for me is it's secure. So, you're going to look for, authentication considerations. How does it tie into your network security locally, and the permissions and otherwise that are within your controls there? How do you access that data? From a remote perspective, what app integrations are available? What recording considerations are there and otherwise? And ultimately, for me, again, with this piece on schools, the visitor entry systems, they're going out and retrieving information on your behalf real time. So, conducting federal and state background checks, tapping into Megan's Law, for example, and making sure that, as I said, the right people are entering that facility and the wrong ones are being asked to leave very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Just to kind of like piggyback on that and continue that conversation, what sets this kind of thing apart from typical ID exchange? We understand the technology and things like that, but how have these solutions truly been elevated in what amounts to a very short amount of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, some of the elements there for me, Dean, looking into the integration side of it, tying in the technology to your mass notification systems. If you have a breach, you're able to get the information out, via text, email, or paging mechanisms. As I said, you can limit the access to, throughout the building, or if you have a disturbance, you can lock a particular section of the building down. I think what, for me, it amounts to is the ability to react and respond and do so quickly. I've touched on a lot of the security elements of it. Again, I think there's an asset component to this. You heard my reference to the, in the answer to the question there a moment ago. But with the visitor entry elements, you're able to gain that reporting and that insight as to where individuals are going throughout the building and if they're accessing areas that otherwise they shouldn't be. So I think what spurred this, next step, unfortunately, events, in society today, I think the integration elements from a technology perspective that are available, certainly the Internet of Things has accelerated adoption rates, and so on. So, I think the final portion of it is the infrastructure. So, the fiber deployments, the speed with which we're exchanging information today and otherwise far supersedes, what we experienced in the past. So I think it's a combination of quite a few factors that ultimately have put us all in a better position to respond to these events.
Very good. Thank you for that, Warren. Let's go ahead and jump into the next poll question. We're talking about peace of mind. A lot of what we're talking about right now is peace of mind, but let's get the registrants' thoughts on this. What solution would give you the most peace of mind? What solution would give you the most peace of mind? Keyless entry, thermal cameras, heat maps and reporting, visitor management. Again, that's keyless entry, thermal cameras, heat maps and reporting, visitor management. I know as a father of 3 small children, as Warren pointed out, I would want most for peace of mind. So how about you, Leslie? I know that you've got some young children too. What are your thoughts on that one?
It was the visitor management again.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. Dave, what are your thoughts on that one?
I did the same one. I mean, the background checks that you can perform at the front desk, it's such a quick rate. I think that's really important.
Warren, you're shaking your head. Yeah, you think so?
Yeah, I think we might have a consensus here, but yeah, no, that was a hard, fast yes for me on the visitor management piece, certainly.
Yeah.
Thinking of Leslie's line of business and the schools and the government buildings and otherwise, like Dave said, the speed with which you can respond to those situations, it's incredible.
How about you, Morgan?
I mean, absolutely. I think that's there right behind. It's kind of the heat maps and the reporting. It's important to kind of have that firewall at the edge of your facility when people are coming in, but being able to react in the moment is the best. But there's a lot of times where you kind of need to sometimes have to do it after something happens, and being able to go back and find things, report on them, and being able to kind of quickly access that data kind of becomes that great realization that maybe you should have caught it on the front end.
Yeah. So visitor management to me is like the big umbrella thing, visitor management. But what exactly is visitor management? Leslie, I'd imagine like visitor management for you is something different depending on the facility. Is that true?
Yeah, so mine's probably very different than the other panelists, but we're trying to understand not just our residents that are coming to the building, and of course we have deliveries coming to buildings now, but then it's guests, and we want to understand who does that guest belong to, who are they visiting, and so if we get the entry software correct, then we can track all of that. So if there was an incident that was to happen, then we can drill back down to understand, kind of backtrack to understand what did happen or who was involved. So it's become a real focus in multifamily.
Mm-hmm. Dave, any additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the application is really it's different for every organization or in education. It's a lot different than it is in a commercial environment. So there's a number of systems out there, and they can accomplish different things. I think, as consumers, it's really you have to figure out what you need and then find an application that fits that need. Very good.
Warren, you're shaking your head. You agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on, Dave.
Good. There's the results. And as we thought, 47% did say visitor management, and right behind it was heat maps and reporting, then keyless entry, and then thermal cameras. It's interesting though, 47%, 21%, 24%, and then I think it was 8%. But clearly all of these things in combination are probably what's most important, right?
Yeah, there's no question about that. The ability to systematically or automate the response to an event is what's so important about these integrations. All of those systems can stand alone autonomously, and they can do a portion of helping secure your facility or your assets. But when you start talking about the integration between, visitor management and access control, and even systems outside of a typical security solution, email, chat, any number of other systems or collaborative tools that an organization uses, that's where you're really making these what used to be autonomous solutions really powerful. They become a part of your day-to-day, and like I said earlier, a non-intrusive way. It's more of an integrated way.
For sure. Thank you, Dave. And we're going to go ahead and stick with you, Dave, while you're all warmed up here. The residential security market has grown tremendously over the last few years, but what sets the commercial grade solutions apart from the ones, say, I could buy on Amazon after the webinar?
Yeah, that's something we deal with quite a bit, and have a lot of conversations about with our clients or potential clients. I can certainly understand the temptation of a full-blown integrated security system compared to a few Nest cameras that you would purchase at Best Buy. I think I mentioned kind of being intelligent consumers earlier, just a second ago. You have to look at what was the purpose. Why were these systems designed? What were they designed to do? What use case do they have? And then you have to consider the application that they're in. Residential systems generally, or not even generally, all of them aren't really meant to be a part of a big system. They're standalone. Maybe there's 3 of them or 4 of them, and at the most, a huge residence may have 8 of them. They're never really meant to be a part of a 40 device system. So they're not built to be easy to support. Generally you have to go to each individual unit to set something up, where commercial devices are meant to be installed and supported on a much bigger scale. So, and not only that, residential solutions don't really have the security concerns that commercial products do, because commercial products are connected to a commercial network, which is, and generally the IT guys are going to manage that and make sure that there's nothing on their network that doesn't suit them. But so I think, really the scalability of residential systems doesn't work, the security of residential systems doesn't work, and kind of most tactically, the durability of those solutions don't work. They're really not meant to be inside of a commercial application that has a lot more wear and tear and things like that than a residential application. So.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. Morgan or Warren, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I would just reinforce the interoperability. A lot of what I'm trying to convey, in my messaging here today is just think of the interconnectedness of all of what you're trying to do and accomplish in the solutions. The cameras, the visitor entry system, the door components, the thermal scanners that we're going to touch on here in a moment, and how all of that interaction takes place. And again, custom built solutions, as Morgan touched on, from the folks at Verkada and otherwise, that's what's going to give you the freedom and flexibility you need to build that response, and do so securely. That's another big component Dave touched on there for me. The commercial grade networks that are backing these up, the firewall considerations and otherwise. So they're subject to the same level of scrutiny that your users, your staff, that they are as well. So it's a big plus.
Excellent, thank you. So Leslie, you implement the systems that we have been discussing across multiple devices all over the place, right? What would you consider best practices or recommendations for the webinar attendees? Again, kind of like being where the rubber meets the road and managing these multiple facilities and multiple kind of vertical facilities. Some best practices for our registrants. What would you recommend?
Yeah, sure. So, some of these things are just expected from at least a resident, if we're just talking about multifamily specifically, our residents expect us to have visitor management, and, I'm a big proponent of keyless, and I think that it brings us a lift in rents oftentimes, and then also sets us apart from our competition. But when I think about best practices, and the other panelists really touched on this, but I think for any company, any industry, as you're deciding what technology you're going to use, the best practice has to be integration. And you can use all of these different technology platforms, but if it doesn't integrate into your operating software, then you've wasted time and money. Like, we have to make it easy for our on-site folks to use and access and navigate. Otherwise, they're not going to utilize it. And then again, we've spent all this time and money on something that's just sitting and not doing what it's supposed to. There's so many options when it comes to technology, but when you boil it down, you have to make sure whatever decision you're making integrates with what you already have.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You guys are all shaking your heads. Anything additional to add there?
I just to kind of reinforce what Leslie's saying, we're obviously a part of countless construction projects. We have a good number of clients or end users that we just work with, that they use us nationally and sometimes internationally. And, with new business, we've seen a challenge for us is, a solution's proposed because we know what it needs to integrate with. And a solution may be awarded, something else may be awarded because it's a little less expensive, without realizing that you're going to lose those integrations. They're not going to work, and you're going to have, siloed systems that really can't interact with each other. So I think that's really a part of what I think people attending can kind of consider, making sure that you have really defined what you need out of the systems you have, and that includes what they're going to do and what they're going to integrate with before you make a purchasing decision. I think that's really important.
Good, and this is a great question, because obviously our registrants are here to take something home with them, so to speak. They're probably already at home, but you all know what I mean. Warren, thoughts on best practices?
Yeah, I think, in terms of best practices, I think everybody's done a great job, from the user experience here to the supplier side, in illustrating, the various considerations that we need to take into account as we outfit our spaces moving forward. For me, I think, with an eye towards the future, Dean, I think this is something that outlasts this current pandemic. We've talked a lot about that, these solutions providing value, from a long-term perspective. I think of the thermal scanners and I think of, long-term care facilities, hospitals, research facilities, and otherwise, continuing, this approach into the future. So I think in terms of establishing best practices, doing so now isn't a current state response. For me, it's a responsible current and future state outlook. The other piece is, in terms of best practices, I would go right back to the cybersecurity and the interaction with the technology that we're talking about. Leslie touched on her residents and their experience, I'm familiar with and have a partnership with the folks at SmartRent as one example. So as we look to integrate the user interaction with their environment, and that goes across the board, the thermal scanners, the utility controls that are available now, to pop onto an app and, at 10 o'clock at night as a business owner, realize somebody left the lights on, or as, in the restaurant and hospitality space to get an alarm related to, an oven that's been left on or otherwise. To have all that at our fingertips is a tremendous blessing in many ways, but at the same time, it comes with caution. So like anything else, you want to make sure that you're buttoned up on the security front, as well as the cybersecurity piece. And that's a marriage that we intend at Comstar to continue to investigate over the next several months.
Very good, thank you. And I know, one of the things, as far as like that integration and all of that stuff, one of the things that we may have glossed over a little bit is the thermal cameras and the implementation of those cameras and the things that they tell us, maybe that we didn't suspect, kind of a byproduct of those kinds of things. Can you touch on that a little bit for us, Warren?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I've been impressed by is the ease of integration, relatively speaking. There's in many cases just a simple switch, a power over Ethernet device that you put out on site. You can repurpose some of your existing technology to accommodate the environment. One great example a partner has recently made us aware of is repurposing metal detectors. So as, with government buildings or school spaces in some cases, unfortunately, but as individuals pass through, there's an LED indicator that gives them a green, yellow, or red light to pull that individual aside. There could be a fever detected or otherwise, and then they can be manually processed. I think the speed to which you can respond to this situation as well is accelerated by deploying, a thermal scanning solution. The accuracy element of it as well. It's proven in, various studies that I've read that, just in terms of a hand administered temperature gauge versus this more systematic approach and software driven solution, you can process more individuals. You can then drive reports off the individual's process and you get your results instantaneously and more accurately. So that's a big need from a compliance and safety standpoint. It goes without saying, but I think that's a key component to the solutions in that space.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, you guys, we've got about 15 minutes left, and I know that we want to make sure that we are getting the Q&A taken care of on the LinkedIn page. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up and make sure registrants, if you've got questions, make sure that you throw them into the chat box, and we will take this over to the LinkedIn page where we will also announce the winner of the cameras. So very cool. Number one, I feel like we could probably spend all afternoon talking about this right now. Unfortunately, we don't have all afternoon. So thank you all very much for being on the webinar today. Comstar, thank you very much for making this happen. We appreciate that very much. I think that is it. So again, thank you panelists, and thank you to our attendees, and to Comstar Technologies for hosting such a timely and insightful discussion. Thank you, and be well, and make sure that you jump on the link here in the chat box to get some of your questions answered on the LinkedIn platform. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Safe.